All right, thank you, Grace.
My computer is taking a moment to do that.
That's
and
okay.
we will launch the poll one thing at a time. Okay, here we go. Poll launching.
So who's in our audience? Are you a middle school student, high school student, college, parent, caregiver, or educator? And if your answer is other, please drop that information in the chat box. We utilize this information just to put on better programs for the audience in which we're serving. So go ahead and put in the chat box if none of them relate to you. All right, we're giving you a few more seconds in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Okay, high school students, perfect. We have a few middle school students, college, educators, parent, and other. Okay, I would definitely love to know what that other represents. So also, we want to know, what is your favorite subject? What do you find as your favorite subject? Physics, math, chemistry, biology, computer science, reading and writing, social studies, arts and music, physical education, or foreign languages? Yes, Stefan, these are single choices. But if you have more than one, you can definitely put those in the chat box as well. And in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see what those favorite subjects are. All right. So I hope our panelists are taking a look at the results. Physics being number 1. It looks as though math and biology are around the same. Then chemistry, computer science is one of my favorite. Earth science. Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah, for putting that in the chat box. All right. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to introduce one of your panelists tonight, and he comes from a wealth of information. So first up, we have Mr. Stephen Bennett, who is an instructional specialist for Katy ISD, CTE in Katy, Texas. He taught engineering and manufacturing in the classroom for over 13 years and has participated in Space Camp for Educators, has presented for the Space Center Houston, and has participated in the NASA internship program. He has been awarded international, national, and local awards in teaching and has a ton of knowledge and experience that he uses to help students prepare for careers in the space industry. And so this is why he's on this panel. And so, Mr. Bennett, would you please take it away? And I want to let you all know that Mr. Bennett is going to be receiving questions throughout his presentation. So go ahead and place those in the Q&A to get those questions answered. Mr. Bennett, take it away.
Yeah, just make them easy questions, please. So I taught in middle school and high school, manufacturing and engineering for 13 years now. Now I'm an instructional specialist with Katy ISD, and I don't get to do those same types of things anymore, but I support all of our business classes, arts, AV, communications, JROTC, and some others. I have about 47 courses that I support. But so I'm kind of coming at it not necessarily from a science point of view, but what kind of careers are in the space field going forward? And science is actually connected to all of them. So if we're looking at creating colonies on Mars or on the moon or any other planetary body, it's going to take all the same resources that we use on Earth. So where we might think about space careers as being, well, you have to be a astronaut or a geophysicist or any of those type of engineer, any of those types of fields. That's not necessarily true. There's over 500 jobs that are available just at NASA in all kinds of different areas. So those things can range from, people doing the trades, people who are programmers, who are travel experts, who are beekeepers, maybe even, I don't know, horticulturalists, because hydroponic systems are being used to be able to grow food on these planets that are hostile environment to what we live in. But mathematicians, analysts, entrepreneurs, even lawyers. Lawyers are defining what can be done in space and who gets the rights to do this and that in space. PR professionals, even mining. We don't think about mining being a thing in space, but there are many, many precious materials in space that we're seeing on asteroids. We've recently landed on Bennu, and finding that there's all kinds of precious materials that are extremely harmful on Earth to be able to mine, and they really make a mess of things. But I'm not sure what kind of harm tearing up an asteroid is going to do. Maybe we'll find out that that's harmful too. But so there's going to be a whole industry built off of those types of things as well. So, and then just in my field now that I'm in now, even business, all the administration and things to run a business that is related to the space industry is going to be important. So I would suggest there's a lot of resources, and we're going to list those resources for you that you could right now. What can I do right now to get into those kinds of things? There's a lot of competitions, there's a lot of resources, there's a lot of scholarships that are available to kids coming out of high school, and we'll have those things listed below for you, or on a PDF for you to be able to use. But even one of the things that we've done recently, we're trying to get aviation and aerospace as a course in KDISD. And so we're reaching around and seeing all the many places you can do that. And I found out of all the places, one of the most recommended places for space sciences is a school called Florida Tech. And Florida Tech has a whole space sciences program and degrees that you can do. I've talked to professors at Rice University here in Houston, and they're very interested in helping send up small satellites, which can be done if you have a robotics team at school. That robotics team usually has to raise, if you're doing FIRST Robotics, you may have to raise $50,000 somehow, and you get corporate sponsorships to do that, to be able to compete. And these small satellites can be bought for about the same price and sent up with experiments and different things that you may do in your courses. You have to, there's an application process to do that. But the satellite industry is just going nuts. I mean, there's the Astra, who's a small rocket company, wants to be able to start sending up a satellite a day in the future, and where that might cost you $60 million if you're doing SpaceX, they're estimated to cost about $500,000. So it's still a lot of money, but that's a whole payload going up, and it splits out to be about $50,000 per thing. But those satellites do everything from, looking at our crops, looking at ocean levels, looking at our coral reefs and seeing what kind of shape they're in, and global temperature changes, all those different things that we need to have to make our lives better on Earth as well. So there's just a ton of opportunities out there, especially for you at your age, to be able to get into, and there's a very big need for it. And that industry is going to take the brightest and best. So I would make sure and look at all the opportunities that are out there. There's a ton of stuff if you want to learn about it on YouTube. People who have been in these interesting, the other people on this panel as well, as where did they come from? What has been their experience to get to where they are in their fields? There's a ton of stuff on space careers, on how they got to where they started as a kid in Iowa, and here they are, working for NASA. And the SEAS program is something that I worked with last summer as a mentor for a team that did a project where they had to land, we use drones and robots, and landed on landed on an asteroid, and did different types of scientific tests. Had to do a robot and program the robot to do different tasks, and then they go back to an originating spot, and then they had to have the drone come pick that robot back up, and then they had to also do their science experiments and talk about them. And C's has probably 40 or 50 different things you can do in it, and you're working with scientists, engineers with NASA, and those types of things. And those kinds of opportunities are where scholarships come from and where internships with NASA come from, because those people that you're working with side by side see your excellence, and that's what they want in NASA, and that's what they want in the space program, and all these other endeavors that we see in industry. They're going to want the best. So is it somebody else's turn?
Well, actually, we have some questions for you.
Oh, okay.
So Brian asks, do you foresee a place for nuclear engineering in the space industry?
I think so, because we have nuclear power is still a viable option if we can figure out how to control it correctly. And you can see that future rockets and spaceships, we're going to be looking for water on all these surfaces, because you can split water into hydrogen and oxygen, and hydrogen can be used as a propellant. But a nuclear option would be excellent in space also to be used as a power propellant. So, yeah, I think it's got a future.
Awesome. And so Mark followed up with the question and asked, what kind of space-oriented degrees are out there already?
There's several. There's some of the panelists may want to jump in on this, because you may have a little better idea. I'm looking at kind of Earth degrees that can be applied to space, where there's astrophysiology, there's astrophysics, isn't there astrogeology? Dr. Gore, or you guys answer those questions.
Yeah, I'll touch on this maybe a little later as well, but I find that a lot of people, there's no one singular path to like a space science or a planetary science profession. So my background is in geology, but I have colleagues with backgrounds in biology and chemistry. Some have engineering backgrounds, astrophysics, astronomy, and then they kind of tailor the skills they learn in kind of their base science courses to be applied to planetary science. So you can kind of start at different points and still find your way to that type of profession.
Right, and even if you have a focus now where you think that this is what you want to do, I changed my major 4 times in college because I got introduced to something else, and that piqued my interest. And I have probably 50 different hobbies that I do about 80% on, then I quit and go to something else. But always be open-minded to other experiences, because those other experiences, whatever you gather in life or in the sciences or in engineering, manufacturing, those all apply to what you end up doing eventually.
Absolutely. And this is for anyone that's on the panel can answer this. And so from an anonymous attendee, they asked, how common are jobs for an astronomer?
I think that there's, it's probably a specialized field. I'm not an expert in that area, but maybe one of the other panelists can speak more to that. Certainly with all the telescopes that with the Hubble and there's even a newer one, I can't remember what its name. Those that we're sending out into
James
space.
Webb.
I mean, we have all these other things that we're putting out there, and not only earthly astronomers, but those who can read those telescopes and the images that come off of those. And there's those that are done with echoes. There's done with, if you go out to New Mexico, you see these huge satellite dishes out in the middle of the desert that are recording, transmissions from space millions of miles away that are translated into colors and things like that. And so I think it's probably not a huge wide field, but there is certainly a need for it. And if you aspire to that and you take all your opportunities, I think that those opportunities are open to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you, Mr. Stephen Bennett, for your presentation. So Miriam asks, is there any way a sophomore in high school can get involved in the planetary science field if they have no local or space opportunities to do so?
Yeah. I'll jump on this one if that's all right. So
Awesome, go ahead.
I can say from personal experience, when I was in high school, I told a substitute teacher that I wanted to be a planetary science and work for NASA. And she flat out told me that that was probably not going to happen and I should find like a rich husband to support my hobby, which obviously is not something acceptable to tell a student in any way, shape, or form. But at that point, I didn't have access to any sort of planetary or space science program. And so I picked a college that had the flexibility to take a science that I maybe really enjoyed and twist it into a planetary science field later on. So I did really, really rigorous earth science for 8 years. And it was like 10 years after I had that conversation with this teacher that I was able to kind of slip into a planetary science field. But you don't necessarily need to jump into it immediately going into college or even into high school. You can kind of seek opportunity later down the road and you'll find it.
Yes, that is definitely great advice. And so one is a question actually that we get this all the time. And so again, this is for all panelist members to answer. But this person wants to know, why do people like to go into space? Is it for curiosity or simple or something more than just that?
The astronauts that I've talked, I'll take this one. The astronauts that I've talked to, I think they all have different motivations. So many of them have come from, just like that question before, from some cornfield town in Iowa, and they didn't ever think that they could become a NASA astronaut. But they joined the Air Force, they became pilots, they did all the things that would work toward that, and had always wanted to kind of be an astronaut, but followed the steps that needed to be done. And there's different times when there's different needs for those positions too. And so you fall into the right time and you in the right circumstance, and you put yourself in a position to be ready for it, and those things can happen for you. Some of those astronauts do it for fame. Some do it for exploration. They want to be somewhere no one else has ever been. Just like any explorers from any past time, what were their motivations? Was it to get riches? Was it to get, that knowledge of what's the unknown and all that kind of stuff? So everybody has a different motivation, I think.
Absolutely. I definitely believe that. And so because of this other question we have, I'm going to roll into our next speaker. So next, we are lucky to be joined by Mr. Roberto Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez has 10 years of experience in higher education. He has served as an academic advisor, freshman seminar instructor, tutoring center coordinator, and diversity, equity, and inclusion and pride coordinator. He is a total pro in understanding the college experience and is focused on helping students prepare for academic and college success, career success, Mr. Rodriguez has dedicated his career to working with students just like you. He can help us understand the skills and experiences that are needed to achieve success in high school and in college. Mr. Roberto, take us away.
Hey, y'all. So I'm excited to be here. Like the introduction mentioned, I love working with incoming college students. I love that, I don't like the word transition, but that transition from high school to college, and just really breaking down the real deal of how to navigate college and how to discover what you want to do. And I am not a planetary scientist by trade. I just married one. So my experience in what planetary science can really be for you is that I find it to be such an interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary field. So it's not just one subject. And so a lot of times when you are in high school, you learn, your bios, your physics, your chemistries. You may be lucky to have geology or planetary science or astronomy. But if you don't, when you go to college, you start this journey of discovering more about these subjects that you're so interested in. And planetary science is such a mix of all of it, or there's a doorway into it. And I know a lot of the planetary scientists that I know started in geology. So it's a nice way to kind of jump into it. So find your classes that you're interested in and take them. Also, if you are interested in planetary science outright, there are quite a few colleges out there that have planetary science courses. They may not have an undergrad degree to get you started, but a lot of the work, like Dr. Gorsuch and others, you go into the master's and PhD levels to really hone in on the field itself. So it's a process to kind of discover what you want to do. And the great thing about the college process and life right now is that everything's online. So if you're interested in things like this, the best place to start is if you are looking at schools, like I think there's a question in the chat about SFA having an astronomy minor. Look into it. If it's something that interests you, and for me as somebody that works with college prep students and first generation students, if they're offering you the most money, you're going to SFA, you're going to minor in astronomy. The great thing about college campuses is every department has a bio page of each professor and what they do. So discover what they do. If you're interested in space and planetary science, there may be a professor there that studies and has done papers on this and research on it. Those are the people you want to talk to. You know, if you're not in an area where you don't have planetary science around you, you can go to these places and email them. You know, I'm married to a researcher. They love talking about their work. Email them, ask them questions. They will love to share what they know, and kind of definitely encourage you to jump into the field. And especially with planetary science, bringing that diversity into the field. You know, for me, I work in a predominantly Black and Latinx community, and I'm all about promoting planetary science and different STEM fields because, and definitely in our communities in particular, we always think of STEM, we think of being a doctor or a nurse because that's what we see. But science is so much more than that. And like Mr. Bennett touched on, there's in NASA and in planetary science and space, there's so many fields out there. And there's so many ways to connect the dots of what you are interested in. And I think the best way is to really reach out to these researchers, these professionals, these professors at the college level to really get started on that journey. So, but I can talk more, but we can answer questions or if anybody has any questions.
Well, you know what? I wanted to tag up the question about how important is coding and computer science in space-related careers, and that's for anyone.
I mean, there's no manual stick on a space shuttle. Everything's computer-based, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So, I mean,
and we talked about earlier, the satellite industry, you know, it's all based in computer science, right?
mm-hmm.
We can't get to any of these places without computer science. We can't get back. We can't do any of the robotics. We can't do, you know, it's all tied.
That being said, it depends on what you want to do ultimately at the end. Like I never took a computer science or a coding class, even in my doctoral studies.
Yeah.
I've since then done a few coding online courses just for my own personal education, but it's not a strict necessity, though I would strongly encourage that you take at least one coding class because it's super valuable.
A lot of these STEM fields, I mean, they all tie into planetary science and space.
Right. Everything.
So they're all on the space station. They're all on these space shuttles and rovers. Everything from engineering to computer science to even in the background, accounting, you know, business, music, art. Like there's a plethora of activities and jobs and careers that you can look at.
Would any of you say that there is a more common field of study? So we have a question, what is the most common field of study for those in planetary science? Common field of study.
I feel like most people I talk to, like the most common is geology, which I think Roberto has already alluded to. There's a lot of people with geoscience degrees, but it's definitely not the only one at all. But that one is the most common in IC at least.
there's a lot of, because of the whole life on other planets and the history of life, a lot of astrobiology is developed. So if you're interested in biology and the study of life, you can go in through that way.
But you know, even if you're a budding photographer, you know, commercial photography, you don't think about that as being part of space, but at every space launch, there's over 450 cameras that are located all over those spacecraft so that if anything goes wrong, they can pinpoint what happened. So, you know, you can take your pick. Pretty much anything ties.
Right. And to piggyback on that, once you find out what you are interested in and what field, you can always look for internships in all these different organizations that we've mentioned, like NASA, like different universities. Starting from day one in your college career, I always say that that's the start of your CV, of your resume, of your professional career. Everything you do is going to be placed on that. So from day one, go reach out to professors, take the classes you want to take. Oh, sidebar. Most intro classes are not the most exciting, so don't let that discourage you. So always take another class to make sure. Go to your career centers, go online to all these different websites to find internship opportunities. A lot of universities partner with different industries, and so they have like actual spots that they need to fill for internships. So I worked at Texas Southern University, go HBCUs, that they partnered with like NASA. And so I had one of my students had an accounting internship there. She did it for her whole 3 years. And now she's working at a big corporation. I think it's John Deere in Illinois because of it. But it's all these opportunities that you just have to look for. And in college, unlike high school, the responsibility of your education goes 100% on you the day you graduate from high school. So all this is out there, you just have to find it.
I'll throw San Jacinto College a bone there, because San Jacinto College, you may not be aware, but Houston has a spaceport, and it's on Ellington Field, which used to be an Air Force base, and I guess we still use it for some Air Force applications. But part of it is being created into a campus of businesses that are space related. A lot of the rocket business, a lot of the rocket industry, and all that are out there. And so they're creating a campus, and there is a curriculum being created for that, for people who can be rocket technicians and all those types of different things like that, manufacturing, engineering. And so all these companies kind of like building a Silicon Valley here in the Houston area, Houston Spaceport. And San Jacinto College is over all the curriculum for the education that goes out on those campuses. So a big kudo to San Jacinto College, and we and Katie want to become more partners with San Jacinto College in that effort.
Absolutely, that's awesome. Mr. Regas, what is the career growth look like for an example, someone entering into the geoplanetary science career? Do you only get to work for NASA, or private sector opportunity exists?
I know Dr. Gorsuch will probably be more qualified to answer this, but I would like to think that the field is wide open and it's there, because half my household income is based on it. So, but we're always going into space. We're always, and a lot of times geology is a natural tie-in to what's out there because of the planets, the meteorites, the asteroids. So Dr. Gorsuch can definitely touch on that. And you don't just have to work for NASA. Like Mr. Bennett said, there's SpaceX, there are other corporations out there that are private now that you can work with, and labs and research facilities like LPI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to tag on to that, I think people hear planetary science and you think, oh, I'm doing science, I'm doing research, like that is my job. But there's so many other opportunities to use your science degree and your science background. So like I personally want to become a lab manager and work in a laboratory and handle instrumentation and teach people how to work scientific equipment. And you know, that's an option out there that other people can also take. Or working on science policy is another one that you hear people talk about. And I don't know much about it, so don't ask me any further, but I've definitely heard people talk about, you know, that, and they look for people that have the expertise in the science, not just, you know, like a different type of background. So that's another opportunity. That's not just like a NASA research
And,
shot.
and not to be funny, but there's a Space Force now, right?
Yes, you know,
Yes.
I want to go in. Well, yeah, I mean, I
It's
have
you.
seen the introduction or a like a what was it called? Like a induction for young people who were part of this like youth space force. I saw an induction for that, like a ceremony or something like that. But I want to go into the third poll question that we have, and I want to hear from the audience. What is the most important thing to you in a future career? Grace, would you please launch that poll? What is the most important thing to you when it comes to a future career? Is it salary, location, personal interest, variety of tasks, impact on society, policy, or history? Would you like to provide a service? Is it prestige or is it creativity? What are those things that push your career interests? And I will probably take a bet that I know, since we can't do, it's multiple choice, right? So you can select more than one, but I think hands down, we're all gonna say what, y'all? What y'all think? It's the money, it's salary. In 5, 4, 3. What you think, Mr. Bennett? What do you think they're gonna say? Personal interest, Madeline said.
Personal interest, you know, it's changed over the years. Back in my day, it would have been salary, but
Uh-huh.
people have more varied interests in what they want out of life anymore. And
Okay.
so studies have shown that that's changed quite a bit.
Okay, let's see about that. I thank you for that input. Can we see the results? Awesome. Hey, yes.
There you go.
Awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Awesome. Thank you, Grace, for launching that poll. And so we're going to hear from our last speaker of the evening, and you've been hearing from her this whole time, but let me give you a proper introduction. Finally, we're super excited to have Dr. Jennifer Gorsh join us today. Dr. Gorsh is a postdoctoral researcher at the Lunar and Planetary Institute. She is a scientist who uses chemistry to study ancient meteorites. You heard me, meteorites, everybody. Her research helps us understand how the solar system formed and how it changed over time. She didn't always study space rocks as a graduate student. Jen spent several years studying Earth rocks and a process called metamorphism. In addition to her scientific interests, Jen is a talented musician and dancer. She's gone from student to scientist and can share her perspective about college, grad school, and what it's like to be an actual scientist. All right, Dr. Gorsh, take us away.
All right, so quick disclaimer. I know we've alluded to this a few times, but this is a singular story that you're hearing right now, and it doesn't necessarily represent every career path, because I don't think I've ever talked to a planetary scientist who has exactly the same career path. It's very much an individual thing, but this is a guideline for those of you who are out there curious. So hi, as Sherelle mentioned, I'm a postdoc and planetary scientist at the Lunar and Planetary Institute. But my background is in geology. So I went to Virginia Tech for geology, and I picked that school because there was at least one professor there that did planetary science. So I thought that was something that I might be able to get involved in as I progressed through my studies. I ended up taking certain geology classes that really made me fall in love with geology, and metamorphic rocks in particular. So rocks that have changed due to temperature and pressure differences that they've experienced. And I kind of put planetary science on the sidelines for many years. So I finished my undergrad. I did a research experience for undergrads or in REU through the National Science Foundation, and I got experience in a lab, and I got to like take crystals and heat them up really, really, really hot, like 1400 degrees Celsius. And I learned how to do a lot of like shop work, like soldering and cool things like that. So that got me really interested in lab work. But then I also had a lot of really great field experiences. I got to spend 5 weeks in Idaho hiking and looking at rocks and mapping them out. I did a undergraduate research projects where I looked at a volcano that used to exist in Southwest Virginia. So I kind of had this really cool dual background between laboratory work and practical geology work. So when I decided to stay at Virginia Tech for my PhD, it was with those interests in mind, not necessarily planetary science. And so my PhD focused on collecting really cool rocks from a really cool location. I got to go to Greece and pick up some really beautiful rock samples. And the goal was to try to understand, why do those rocks look the way they do? And how did they get back to the surface? We knew these rocks came from sometimes 50 miles below our feet. So that takes an incredible force and process to bring them back up. So that was kind of the goal of my research for 5 years. And it wasn't until I was finishing my PhD that the possibility of doing planetary science kind of came back in my view. So I applied for a job to be a postdoc with the LPI and NASA, and I actually didn't get it. I was rejected, and I ended up spending a year as a visiting professor instead at the University of West Georgia. So I spent a year teaching intro level geology classes and planning coursework, and also working with some of the junior and senior level geology students at that school. And I kept in contact with people at NASA, and they reached out and said, hey, we have another job opportunity. We really think you should apply. And that's the job I have now. So just goes to show that if you fail the first time, persist. And I have to admit, when I saw the job application, I was like, I don't know if I necessarily meet these qualifications, but at the end of the day, they were looking for a skill set, not a science research. So I've spent most of my career at this point taking things that I've learned and trying to apply them to new problems. And I think that's important to realize, that you don't necessarily have to stick exactly to what you pick when you're 18 and you start college. You are free to move and transition and shape things differently as you go forth. So that's where I am right now.
I think that is incredible advice, and thank you for being transparent and sharing that with us, Dr. Gorsh. So as I look through the questions, someone asked, Dr. Gorsh, can you describe your typical day at work? What does it look like a day in a life of a planetary scientist or a postdoctoral student?
Okay, so I'm going to go with pre-COVID description.
Okay, right.
Because my COVID situation is at home. I'm on my laptop.
Sure.
Do a lot of computer modeling actually right now, and that's not super exciting. But my typical day as a research scientist is I get to be on site at the Johnson Space Center, which is super exciting because there are so many cool samples there. I'm looking at meteorites that are older than the Earth, and I'm usually spending at least a portion of my day in a laboratory processing those samples and preparing them to do different analyses on them. So I might spend, a handful of hours in a lab taking a rock, turning it into a powder, dissolving that powder in an acid, and then putting it on like a little billet or some sort of like podium so that I can zap it with a laser later, or get some sort of information about its chemistry. And then when I'm not in the lab, I'm usually setting up different computer models. So I try to combine computer modeling with measurements from the lab and see if the two of them can, what's the best word to use? See if the models can justify the measurements you see, and do the measurements make sense within the context of the models. So it's a lot of using different types of methods to check yourself. So you're basically testing your science and you're testing your hypotheses. And then the nights I talk to you guys about careers.
Yes, outreach. Thank you so much. I am screaming outreach, ladies and gentlemen, because I get to work with scientists just like Dr. Gorsh. And so being in a part of the education team, we always typically call on our scientists to conduct outreach. And so this is what it is: public engagement, for them to answer questions about their sciences and, what are they exploring? What are the goals? What are the purpose? And so one of the questions that came through for you, Dr. Gorsh, was, what is the most exciting accomplishment you have experienced working in planetary science?
Ooh. Last summer, I had the great joy. So the Lunar and Planetary Institute does an internship program, and I had the great joy of mentoring 2 students. And it was my first time working as a mentor. This is a very small world. Roberto said he married a planetary scientist. He was my collaborator in this project. We mentored 2 undergraduate students, and they had phenomenal projects. One of them looked at Venus. One of them looked at some really weird meteorites that had some weird minerals in them. And we were able to take them through 10 weeks of a neat project, and hopefully they'll get to write some papers out of those projects. So that was my first experience mentoring to that level. And that's something I'm very, very proud of. I think they enjoyed themselves. I hope so.
Well, that is exciting. I love working with the interns as well. I also love to see them come back or see them apply for a planetary science like LPSC, which is the Lunar and Planetary Space Conference or Space Science Conference. And so I absolutely love seeing them apply and then present the science that they've researched. So that's super cool. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I also now want to take the opportunity and put in the chat box a lot of the questions were around programs, organizations, internships, how can they get involved? And so I'm going to ask Grace if she would be so kind to drop the link. We've created a resource page for you all, and Grace has dropped it in the chat box now. And basically these resources is not a all be all. So if you know of some clubs, organizations, programs that you are a part of that you can add to this list, please feel free to email us at, you can email me personally at sweb@lpi.usra.edu. We would love to add these things to our list. Matter of fact, the research page that we just put in the link, if you lose it, we're going to attach it to our webpage for VEEPS. So if you can go to LPI webpage, under VEEPS, we're going to keep this as a live living document. So if you misplace it or something like that, you can find it there for those resources. Anyone else want to talk about organizations or programs that they have been involved in that you haven't talked about already, that would encourage our participants to be on the lookout for those opening applications?
I have one.
Okay, go ahead, Roberto.
It's just from this past experience because I work with high school students. So this past summer, if you are in Houston or if you're able to travel and able to purchase this, it's the Space Camp at Space Center Houston. And for a week, we studied, I think middle school did Venus, and then the high schoolers did Mars for a whole week, and they did everything from a day of coding and coding robots and building robots and having them run through a Martian landscape to pick up items and seeing if the coding worked. They did everything from, we learned how to scuba dive, to we were in a pool, and they learned how to scuba dive and understand weightlessness and how to maneuver in space. What else did they do? They built their own Martian habitat. So there's a lot of different aspects of STEM. Even if you're not too familiar with a lot of the different science components, it's something that opens up your mind to the opportunity to discover planetary science. So I found that very fascinating. A lot of our students that were interested in STEM went into the camp, but they all wanted to be doctors and nurses. They didn't understand the plethora of STEM. So this opened up their mind and they loved it. So if that's an opportunity that you ever have in the summer. So.
Yeah, I'd once again kind of mention SEAS with this Texas Space Grant Consortium. If you look at Texas Space Grant Consortium, and we'll have that added to that list if it's not already there, there are several opportunities that come along with scholarships and internships and programs, competitions, things like that. And it's like all year long. There are new programs introduced all year long. So I would certainly check out that website.
I guess maybe the last thing to add is you don't necessarily have to look there. So when you start college, you're going to build relationships with your professors. And sometimes it's just really easy to go in and say, hey, I'm interested in just getting experience working in a geology lab or processing samples. And a lot of times professors are looking for undergraduate researchers that can do that work. And you really get the nitty gritty of what it means to do science. You know, if you pardon the pun, you get to learn the grind of the polishing table. and you know, what is it like to use a rock saw or work with acids, or just take the opportunity, even if it feels like it's busy work, just getting the experience of like doing kind of the day-to-day sample processing, I think is really, really a good way to start.
Yeah. Oh, and if I can add one more thing quickly, just to reiterate, if you're interested in the field, look up professors on these different universities or research labs, check what they published. And a lot of y'all are in high school, you're learning how to read scholarly journals and scholarly articles. Read it and see how it interests you and how it piques your interest. And a lot of these professionals and science educators are hosting community engagement events all over, whether it's online or in person. And you can learn about different topics that might pique your interest as well. And a lot of it is online that you can actually search for and see.
Yeah, see that Mark had mentioned FIRST Robotics. He participates in FIRST Robotics and Civil Air Patrol. Civil Air Patrol is an excellent organization to get involved with, as far as, you know, your school can become a chapter and learn how to, you know, they'll take you up and fly, and you're working with retired Air Force folks, pilots for the most part, and who also have connections with NASA a lot of times too. So yeah, those are excellent things. And FIRST Robotics, another excellent organization for competition, and if you want to get into that engineering robotics side of things, those are great.
And for the person that's asking about international students, my advice would be that, you know, look at the qualifications, right? Look at those qualifications. And I also read for a money hurdle, there are opportunities where they will put out scholarships or sponsorships for different internships and programs. So just be on the lookout for that. And I would say advocate for yourself. If you don't see it online, simply by communicating that, because I'm sure they want people to be a part of that program. So by advocating for yourself, you know, a lot of times when we think, well, you know what, no way that they would say yes. You know, initiating that by saying, hey, I need help, then you never know what that can turn into. So definitely advocating for yourself is if money is a hurdle. Go ahead, Roberto.
Oh, and also there are, starting in high school, if you are in high schools that have these programs like Upward Bound that are college prep, we paid for our students. In college, there are support programs for first-gen students or first-gen science students. You have to find them. They're in hidden pockets everywhere, but you have to find those resources, and they offer internships or, you know, financial assistance for these programs as well. And for any international students, I know some people are actually in other countries as well. Other countries have space programs like ESA in Europe, India, and Japan. So look into those places as well. Again, if you don't have access immediately, it can be on a computer as well. Just look for it.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Grace, because I see you put something in the chat box. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to pop in and say, particularly if you're searching for funded opportunities, check out Pathways to Science. They list a lot of opportunities through different organizations, and they have a search engine that you can use, and you can specify that you're only looking for opportunities that are funded and paid. And that does reduce the opportunities, but that way you don't have to do a ton of digging yourself. They don't have everything, but it's a good place to start. And then one other thing to keep in mind, we've been talking about internships and you know, very structured and competitive programs, but there are a lot of other ways to be involved in STEM if that's something you're just excited to do on your own time. And that's something you can find in the resource document. There are citizen science projects that you can get involved in. There are all kinds of online resources. And it's a great way to just show that you're interested and you already can start to build skills. And I would really encourage you to check those out. Some of them are very cool projects and lots of availability. Anyway, just wanted to pop in and say that.
Well, thank you, Grace. You know, throughout our entire event, we talked about these career pathways. And if you're a student that's saying, you know what, though, Miss Webb, Mr. Bennett, Dr. Gorsh, Mr. Roberto, Miss Grace, I still don't know what it is that I want to do. Well, guess what? No fear. In the chat box, I just placed a career quiz as well as Explore Education. Those are two resources that would kind of facilitate and guide you to one of your interests or to help you to discover your interest if it's not already there. And so I hope that you take advantage of those links if you do not already have a ideal career set for yourself. At least check it out to see if what you're thinking aligns with what you are pursuing to do. So please take advantage of that. Of course, that is free of charge. Do we have any final thoughts at this time? Oh, and they're in the resource document as well. Thank you, Grace.
I would say, and I think everybody's touched on it, is, you know, if you have a passion for this, talk to people, network with whoever you can, show your passion to whoever you can about it. And always, if you're interested in doing something, let people know that you're interested in it, because sometimes you may love this stuff and you may be great at it, but you hide yourself in a corner and nobody ever knows. So put yourself out there, let people know that this is what you want to do, and somebody's going to notice that and they're going to pick up on it. So that's my.
Final word, Dr. Gorsh?
I guess everything isn't black and white, and if you fail once, that's not the end of that one path that you might be interested in. Like I said I would do planetary science when I was in high school, and I didn't fall into a career that labeled me as a planetary scientist until 10 years later. And in, you know, that intermedium, you know, I had to reapply for grad school because my first round, there was no one who had money to fund a grad student, and it took a second round, and I got rejected the first time I tried to apply to be a NASA postdoc. And if I hadn't gotten rejected, I wouldn't have gotten the teaching skills I got. So don't think of failure as like a reflection on you or on your integrity as a scientist or a person. It's a lot of times an opportunity to do something else, but you can always come back from it, and you can always like come round and try again.
Excellent advice. Roberto, last word?
Well, I think that everyone touched on amazing points to end everything off. I think more than anything, if you have a computer, you can start there. If you don't have a lot of resources, a lot of times you may have schools that don't have the resources or the subjects that you're interested in. Search for it and see what's on there, you know, and see how to reach out to people. When you get to college, especially for planetary science, that's where their journey really begins, because you have so many pathways to get into planetary science. And I love talking about college and the real deal of how to deal with college. So anybody, especially in the States, can email me anytime. So.
Awesome. Well, then could you please drop your email in the chat box, Mr. Roberto, please? And thank you. Thank you so much. And for a lasting word for all of our attendees, our panelists, would you please give our panelists a round of applause, please? You guys did an amazing job. Thank you, Mr. Bennett, Dr. Gorsh, and Mr. Roberto. You guys did amazing. And Grace, thank you always for your support. And last but not least, Grace, you wanted to say something? I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, don't run off. We have 2 final polls.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, for our last thing that we would like to ask you last, we have just 2 quick poll questions that we would like to ask you. Would you please take the time out to fill them out? And to answer Trenton's question, Trenton, I did not forget about you. Trenton asks, are there going to be other outreach opportunities like this? And the answer is absolutely yes. Trenton, we will have programs like this going into the future. So one of the survey questions is simply asking, what are some topics that you want to hear about? We want to make sure that we're bringing you all the resources so then you can be able to have confidence to those next steps, right? And so if there are things that interest you, please email us so we can build a program around those things. Or if it's not much of an interest to others, we can simply provide you some resources if we have them.
I was just going to say, I was a little bit disappointed there when Grace came on and said, wait, because I thought she was going to say we have refreshments now.
Oh, we wish we could have refreshments. Let me tell you, the Lunar and Planetary Institute, we are the best at catering. So I cannot wait for us to have in-person events again so we can feed all of you. We have the best caterers, guys.
I'm going to show up on your doorstep one day.
You're absolutely welcome. You're welcome. Thank you, Miss Sylvia. We thank you for loving the event. We enjoy putting these on for each and every one of you. So thank you so much for your feedback. It is appreciated. This is why we do what we do. Grace, we can end. And everyone, you have a wonderful night. We will see you next time. Grace, go ahead.
All right. The session is recorded. It is going to be up on YouTube. When you leave, as you're leaving now, you're going to be redirected to take a survey. The questions aren't required. You can answer one or two of them or all of them, but we would love your feedback in the survey. And in case you missed it, the link to the resource document is in one of the questions in the survey. So you can copy and paste it and find that link if you need it one more time. But the resource document will also be found on the webpage and on the YouTube video with this recording. So I think that's now you can go. Now you've got the info. But please do that survey if you have just a minute or two.
All right. Thank you, panelists. You did a tremendous job. Thank you, attendees. Your questions was phenomenal. Everyone have a safe and blessed night, and we will see you next time. Feel free to add our newsletter. Subscribe to our newsletter so you can get those updates as the VEEPS programs are being organized. Thank you again and have a good night.